All the internet rules and wearing a cap 2 days in a row. I don't give a rat's ass. I'm traveling. I can do whatever the guano I want. Today's podcast is really focusing in on something interesting I'm noticing. We spend so much time calling in big breakthroughs. We shift things, we plan, we structure, we arrange our systems so that they will systematically, building block by building block, bring in something really new. Maybe you are a cycle breaker. Maybe generationally you have just been surrounded by people with really intensively, heavily, I want to say, like, heavily loaded stories around money, around relationships, around connection. You might be a cycle breaker in that you are the first person in your family who understands healthy emotional connection that doesn't look like you selling out or pretending that your feelings don't exist. You might be a masculine who has been born into a family where generation after generation after generation, men are just these hard rock objects that don't feel, don't cry, don't breathe, don't blink, just kind of function like objects that float through the world. I don't know what your particular story is, but I have about 10 or 12 of these, like, first one in many, many, many cycles, cycle breaker for many reasons. What I'm noticing, however, is that my energy, my focus, my determination, my decisions, my structures, the intention with which I have arrived to move the individual pieces, to recalibrate my world, to really go back to the drawing board and start over as often as I have to, in order to shift the current, the texture, the temperature, the dominant frequency, the dominant information that is released from my cells, from my epigenetics, out into the physical, practical, tangible decision makings, action taking, being able to determine, distinguish between, hey, that's something I should move towards. That's a really powerful opportunity versus, oh my gosh, I'm going to die in a ball of flames if I go down this road again, just like all my ancestors. So how do we make the distinction? I noticed that something big that's happening is that the kind of preparation, the kind of container, the kind of decision-making processing, the thinking, the feeling, the moving through with perseverance and determination that is required when you are calling something in, when you are preparing for something that you don't even know about. You don't have any evidence from people you've looked at in your family or maybe even in your friendship circles. It's like, well, I don't really know anybody who's done this really well. Okay. When that's happening, your identity is so fixed from, I call it, like, you have this combat identity, this, I'm on the battlefield, I'm fighting my heart out to shift the needle, I'm fighting my heart out to make sure that I live the kind of life everybody that I know has, determined is not possible for me. Okay, I am determined to have a different narrative, to live a different experience, right? When that is the state with which you arrive every day, it is actually easier to miss the door opening than it is to actually see it, perceive it, and walk through it. And often, what will look like caution, hesitation, balancing out my different options, like, am I sure this is the right thing to do? Do I feel like this is really aligned? A lot of that systemic processing is actually just habit from being in the preparation season for so long. And so I'm noticing a lot of triggers, a lot of trepidation, and a lot of hesitation when this big, juicy, beautiful thing comes floating in before me. And it feels even more delicious than what I thought it was going to feel like when it arrived. I'm noticing this sometimes freeze, collapse, hesitation when the door actually swings open, or this sense of over analyzing it and being like, what's the catch? Something's going to break. The other shoe's going to drop. This is just another trick and a trap. It's another disguised dark night of the soul. This is just another test that I'm going to have to pass. And that predominant energy is exhausting because it requires a completely new everything to actually walk through the door, to put down my shield and my sword, to disarm in order to actually successfully move from constantly being outside the room where I'm preparing, analyzing, researching, to occupying space, to actually taking up territory, to actually beginning to embody the very thing I have spent so long preparing for. This is so much more tricky than I actually thought it would be. This is so much more tricky than I anticipated. And it's requiring a whole new skill set that I am realizing most people have underdeveloped, and that's why most people don't make the big jump. Stay tuned. We're just getting started.